Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're diving into something today that I'm sure we've all thought about more than we'd like to admit, and that is church scandals.
Ooh.
We're going to be looking at an episode called Stay Out of the Storm, navigating scandals with wisdom and grace.
Okay.
And, you might think this is just about, like, avoiding gossip or something.
Right.
But it's way deeper than that.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about how God works through these things.
Yes.
What our responsibility is as Christians.
Yes.
And how we can be a force for good,
Mm.
even when things are really messy.
You know, what I think is so fascinating is that the episode just goes right into this tension
Okay.
between wanting to know what's going on
Right.
and realizing her limitations.
Okay, let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
So the episode starts out with this proverb,
Okay.
between the tree and the bark, don't put your finger. I love the imagery, but what does that even mean?
Well, think of it this way. The Proverbs warning us about meddling in things that we don't understand. Okay.
And the source material connects this to Jeremiah 25, where God disciplines Israel
Okay.
by allowing Babylon to conquer them.
Right.
And you might think, okay, well, God's punishing Israel, case closed.
Right.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
God doesn't stop there.
Oh.
He also holds Babylon accountable
Wow.
for their cruelty and violence
Interesting.
during the conquest.
So they were a tool, but they're still responsible.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a sobering thought.
It really is.
Right.
And it shows us that God's working on a level we can't always grasp.
Right.
He sees the full picture,
Yeah.
the long game,
Yeah.
and we're often just stuck on the immediate drama.
Yeah, we get caught up in the moment.
And so this is why rushing to judgment or getting involved in a church scandal without understanding the full context can actually do more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
We might think we're helping, but we could be interfering with God's plan for justice and restoration.
So it's not about being passive. It's
Ah.
about realizing our limitations.
So does that mean we should never speak up, even if we see something that seems wrong?
That's a great question. And the source material addresses this directly.
Okay.
It reminds us of Jesus' words in Luke 17:1, where he says, scandals are inevitable,
Right.
but woe to the ones who cause them.
Okay.
So the emphasis isn't on burying our heads in the sand,
Right.
but on being incredibly careful about how we engage.
Okay.
It's about discerning if our involvement will actually contribute to peace and healing, or if it will just add fuel to the fire.
So instead of being gossip spreaders, we're called to be peacemakers.
Precisely.
Okay, so what does that look like in the context of a church scandal?
Right. It's more than just staying silent.
Right.
The source material challenges us to consider how our actions, our words, even our thoughts might be contributing to the problem.
Ooh, that's convicting.
It is.
So are we just supposed to sit back and watch, even if people are being hurt?
Not at all. The source material offers a powerful alternative: becoming an intercessor.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
Like a spiritual first responder
Exactly.
instead of just like a spectator.
Yeah. But what does it mean to be an effective intercessor in these situations?
Right.
Well, we can look to the Old Testament prophets and those who stood in the gap,
Okay.
praying for their communities,
Mm-hmm.
even when things were incredibly messy.
Yeah.
Think of people like Daniel or Esther or Nehemiah.
Right.
They understood that prayer was their most powerful weapon.
Yeah, so instead of fueling the fire with gossip or judgment,
Right.
we're dousing it with prayer.
Yes.
Interceding for wisdom, for healing,
Yeah.
for God's will to be done.
Hmm.
That feels so much more empowering than getting caught up in the drama.
It is. And it shifts the focus from our limited understanding to God's infinite wisdom and power.
Yeah.
Remember, he sees the full picture even when we only see fragments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, it's easy to say, pray for wisdom and discernment,
Mm-hmm.
but like, what does that actually look like?
Yeah.
When you're in the moment
Right.
and you're like really tempted to jump in, how do you hit the pause button and choose to pray?
That's a real struggle.
Yeah.
The source material says our natural inclination is to try to get involved,
Right.
to fix things,
Right.
or at least figure out who to blame.
Yeah.
But it challenges us to consider, like, what if our first response was to pray
Okay.
instead of reacting?
Right.
What if before we shared that piece of gossip,
Right.
we said, God, is this helpful?
Oh,
Will this bring peace and healing?
okay.
Yeah.
I'm feeling convicted already.
Yeah.
I know I've been guilty of that.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping to conclusions.
Yeah.
Spreading rumors without knowing all the facts.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the whirlwind.
Especially when it involves people you care about.
Exactly. And that's a crucial point.
Mm-hmm.
Church scandals often involve people we know and love,
Right.
which makes it so much harder to stay objective.
Yeah.
We feel torn between loyalty to our friends
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to see justice done.
So how do you balance that? Like, how do you support someone you care about, but also acknowledge they might have messed up
Mm-hmm.
or worse,
Right.
been involved in something really bad?
Well, the source material encourages us to remember that true love doesn't mean condoning bad behavior.
Right.
It means holding people accountable while also offering grace and support.
Mm-hmm.
It means praying for them,
Right.
even when you're disappointed by their actions.
Yeah, it's like that saying, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell someone the truth, even if it hurts.
Right.
So how you say it matters,
Right.
with humility,
Yeah, compassion.
not judgment,
Yeah.
not condemnation.
Exactly. And that's where prayer is so important.
It is.
Yeah.
It helps us to check our own motives.
Right.
Are we speaking up because we want to be right
Yeah.
or out of love?
Mm-hmm.
Are we trying to build up or tear down?
It helps us get in line with God's heart,
Exactly.
which is always about redemption and restoration.
And it helps us to see things through God's eyes.
Right. Not just our limited perspective.
Mm.
Remember, God is the ultimate judge.
Yeah.
He'll deal with it in his time.
Mm.
Our role is not to take his place,
Right.
but to be instruments of his grace
Yeah.
and healing.
That's so freeing.
It is.
It takes the pressure off
It does.
to have all the answers or fix everything.
And lets us focus on what we can control,
Right.
our own hearts and actions.
Yeah.
The source material reminds us that even in a church scandal,
Mm-hmm.
we can choose to be peacemakers, intercessors,
Yes.
a force for good.
I love that this episode doesn't shy away from the hard stuff, but it's also so hopeful.
It is.
We're not powerless.
No,
We have a role to play.
we do.
And it starts with prayer
Yes.
and doing God's will.
And, as we navigate these tough situations,
Yeah.
the source material reminds us
Yeah.
to keep the main thing the main thing.
What's that?
Sharing the good news.
Oh, right.
It's easy to get so caught up in the drama that we forget our mission to spread the gospel.
So how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we stay focused on God's love, even when everything is crazy?
Well, the source material says we need to be mindful of what we're feeding our minds and hearts.
Oh,
If we're always focused on the negative,
right.
if we're surrounded by gossip
Yeah.
and judgment,
Yeah.
it's going to be hard to stay positive.
It's like trying to grow a garden in a toxic waste dump.
That's a great
I mean,
analogy.
we have to make a good environment for faith and hope to grow.
Yeah.
So, what can we do to shift our focus back to the good news?
Well, the source material has some advice.
Okay.
First, be intentional about the content you consume.
Okay.
Instead of just scrolling social media
Right.
or watching the news, choose to fill your mind with scripture.
Right.
Or good podcasts or books. Surround yourself with positive people
Yeah.
who build you up,
Yeah.
not the negative ones.
We need to be proactive.
Yes,
We can't just absorb whatever's out there.
Yeah.
We have to make good choices.
exactly. And it's also about actively looking for chances to share the gospel. When we're full of God's love, it
Yeah.
will overflow
Right.
into our lives.
So even in a church scandal,
Mm-hmm.
we can be a light
Yes.
source of hope.
Remember, the enemy wants to use these things to divide us,
Right.
but God wants to use them to make us stronger,
Yeah.
draw us closer to him, and make us better witnesses.
That's powerful. It reminds us that God is working in the mess.
He is.
He's using all things for good for those who love him.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another point from the source material.
Okay. Personal responsibility.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Here comes the conviction.
It's easy to focus on what others have done wrong,
Yeah.
especially in a scandal.
Right.
But the source material challenges us to look at ourselves.
Okay.
Have we been part of the problem?
Mm.
Have we gossiped,
Right.
judged,
Yeah.
fueled the division?
You know, it's funny. You saying that makes me think of that proverb.
Oh, yeah.
Between the tree and the bark, don't put your finger.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're the ones putting our finger where it doesn't belong.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It goes back to recognizing our limitations
Right.
and not getting involved in things we don't understand. But it also applies to our own lives.
Right.
Are we meddling where we shouldn't be?
Yeah.
Are we trying to fix things that are God's responsibility?
That's a lot.
It is.
But it's also freeing.
It is.
It takes the pressure off of us
Yeah.
to control everything.
It does.
And lets us focus on what we are responsible for.
Right.
Our own hearts,
Mm-hmm.
our own actions,
Yeah.
and our relationship with God.
Exactly. And when we do that,
Yeah.
when we stop trying to fix others
Right.
and work on ourselves,
Yeah.
we open ourselves up to God.
Yeah.
He can use even the tough stuff, even church scandals, to make us more like Christ.
That's a great reminder that even when it's messy, God is still working.
He is.
He's using all things for good
Yes.
for those who love him.
And are called according to his purpose.
That's right.
And that brings us to a question from the source material.
Okay.
What if, instead of seeing church scandals as something bad,
Right.
we saw them as a chance to grow,
Okay.
to change?
As individuals and as a community,
Yeah,
that changes everything.
it does.
It's like going from a victim to a victor.
Yeah.
Instead of letting the negativity win,
Right.
we can use it to get stronger
Yes.
in our faith and in our mission.
God brings beauty from ashes.
Yeah.
He can redeem anything.
This has been such a good deep dive.
It has.
It's made me think differently about how to handle these situations
Yeah.
and to focus on being a peacemaker
Yes.
and an intercessor and showing Christ's love even in the storms.
I agree. It reminds us that everything we do, our actions, our words, even our thoughts,
Right.
have an impact.
Yeah.
So let's make sure our impact is good.
Yes.
Let's spread grace, forgiveness,
Yeah.
and hope.
Even in the tough times.
Exactly.
That was quite a journey today.
It really was.
We've talked about some hard stuff.
Yeah, some tough questions.
But I don't know about you, but I feel more hopeful now.
Me too. I think the source material, it doesn't give us all the answers, like a step-by-step guide,
Okay.
but it does give us a way to think about these things with
Yeah.
wisdom and grace and, commitment to God's truth.
It's like we've got a new way to see these issues.
Yeah.
Instead of getting caught up in the drama and who's to blame,
Right.
we can focus on what God's doing,
Yeah.
how he's working, and how we can help.
And that's what makes it so powerful.
Right.
It's not ignoring the problems.
Right.
It's about responding God's way.
Okay, so let's recap.
Yeah.
For everyone listening, just to really drive these points home.
Okay.
First, God is in control,
Yes, absolutely.
even when it doesn't feel like it.
Even when it's chaotic,
He's got this.
he does. His justice is perfect,
Yeah.
and his plans are bigger than we can imagine.
We may not always understand,
Right.
but we can trust him.
Absolutely.
He's good and he loves his church.
He does.
Second, we're called to be peacemakers,
Yes.
not troublemakers, not adding to the mess.
We should be praying,
Yeah.
seeking reconciliation, trying to bring people together.
Building unity.
And third, we have to stay focused on the good news.
Yes.
It's so easy to get distracted.
It is. Church scandals can really sidetrack us.
But we can't forget our mission
Right.
to share the gospel.
To reach those who need Jesus.
It's easy to get caught up in the church's problems
Yeah.
and forget about the people outside
Who are hurting.
who need hope.
Who need what Jesus offers.
We can't let these situations silence us
No.
or make us less passionate.
The world needs to see our faith.
Yes,
Especially when it's tough.
especially when the church is struggling. They need to see forgiveness, grace,
Yeah.
real transformation.
So I have a question as we wrap up.
Okay.
It wasn't in the episode exactly,
Okay.
but it feels like a natural next step.
Right. All right.
If scandals are chances to pray, and we've said they are,
We have.
how can we get better at praying? How do we become those powerful intercessors?
Yeah.
Like the episode talked about, people who can really stand in the gap and pray with power for God's will.
That's a great question to think about.
Yeah.
It's not just about knowing about prayer. It's about doing it.
Becoming people of prayer.
Yes.
Well, we've got a lot to think about from today.
We do some powerful tools
Yeah.
to help us through these situations.
With wisdom and grace.
To be peacemakers.
To bring healing.
But in the end,
Yeah.
it comes down to surrendering to God, seeking his guidance.
Letting him lead.
Even through the storms.
Thanks for being with us on the deep dive.
It's been great talking about this.
We hope this gave you something to think about.
Some tools for your toolbox.
Remember, even in the trials, even in the scandals,
God is working.
and we can be part of his peace,
His love.
his grace.
Keep seeking truth.
Keep spreading hope.
And keep diving deep